Thanks for listening to the Clive Barker Podcast. Please do us a favor and subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcasts, so you never miss an episode. In episode 318, Jose and Ryan are joined by Ed and Nina of Cenobium and Catalina of Little Spark Films to talk about the 2021 Candyman film directed by Nia DaCosta. We start out the episode with our spoiler-free takes, and then we dive deep and really dig into the details and our first impressions. This episode is sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination shop is dedicated to benefiting the Arts and Medicine program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. Up to 50% of the proceeds will support the program where artist Don Bertram volunteers monthly. Don Bertram is a longtime friend of Clive's and celebrates and continues to be inspired by his art. He uses that inspiration to help kids through the Texas Children's Cancer Center, and we couldn't be more thrilled to continue to work with him. There's a news feature video that shows Don working with the kids at Texas Children's Cancer Center and his artwork. Click the side banner at www.clivebarkercast.com to find links to his videos and his Etsy shop where you can buy his prints, books, and support this wonderful program.
So, hey guys, welcome to episode number 318. We're going to be discussing Candyman from 2021. We just saw... Everybody in this call, except for Ed, has gone to the theater to watch it, and now we're going to be discussing it a little bit. Yeah, and Nina.
Hello.
So let's talk about it.
What I would like to, because I had a friend that messaged me, you know, when I wrote about seeing it on Facebook, I had a friend that wrote to me, commented on there that said, I heard this was a reboot, but other people said it was a sequel. Can you clear this up? And I was like, it's a sequel. It's definitely a sequel. I think that reboot, you know, is a term that confuses people, right? Because it's a reboot in the fact that it's been since 1999 since they made a Candyman movie.
Yeah, but they use so many terms like reimagining and blah, blah, blah. But also, let's mention that this will be spoiler, this episode.
Yeah, so we're going to start out talking about our impressions of it without spoiling it, and then we're going to have a cutoff point where we say, Pause your episode if you haven't watched the movie, because we're going to spoil it at this point.
We'll be like, okay, so if you don't want to have any spoilers.
But I would imagine that most people listening to this of the Clive Barker podcast are very familiar with the basics, you know, of Candyman. And concept and,
you still have to watch the movie because we will be spoiling it. But for now, this is the spoiler-free section of the podcast. We're just going to talk about our experiences watching the movie, you know, what we thought about it, and then we'll give you plenty of warning before we get into the spoilery part, okay?
This is the fun-filled part.
Well, and even going back to what we were saying, even the IMDb at the top of it calls it a spiritual successor or a spiritual sequel, which I don't agree with. I think that's wrong. It's an all-out. It's a sequel.
I don't think they updated that yet. I don't think they updated it because, I don't know if this is a spoiler. I don't think it is, but it is a sequel because there are characters and there's references to the first movie and the second one. Yeah. Even characters are recurring and all that stuff. Actors are coming back from the first movie, so it is definitely a sequel.
And is it the kind of thing where if you never saw the original, then it doesn't really matter. You could still watch this and enjoy it just fine.
Well, it's that way like Hellraiser 2, right? They explain enough about what happens in Candyman, the first one, so that you don't need to see it because they spell it out for you.
In my opinion, I'm going to say you should watch the first one before watching this. It'll make it so much better. Yeah, I think so.
Agree. But they do make it so you don't have to.
There's some drive-in theaters around the country that are offering a double feature of the 1982.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Which is a pretty cool option.
That's a really good option. I wish
Joe Bob says check it out.
So I do say check it out because it is a sequel. And if you watch the first one, you'll be able to understand this movie a little better because there's some backstory that they mention it. But you should experience that backstory.
Including Candyman 2, which is even more backstory.
Oh, yes. Yep. Yeah. Just don't bother watching Candyman 3. It's not very... Yeah.
It's the ugly stepchild of the Candyman trilogy.
That's right.
I guess let's go kind of round robin and ask, people's opinion or impression of it.
Sure.
And so, Catalina, do you want to go first and tell us your impression of, I guess, the spoiler-free version of your impression of it?
Spoiler-free version. I mean, I enjoyed it. I had a really great time. I thought that it was a beautifully well-made film. There was a lot of really cool in-camera tricks that they did, and the lighting was beautiful. I loved how it was acted. I'm biased, though. I had already predetermined that I was going to like it. I was like, this is shiny.
You laughed, you cried, you kissed $3 goodbye.
Yeah.
$3. I wish.
Yeah.
More like 30.
Yeah. That's from Hardware Wars, the old Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. I paid $18 to get just for myself.
Yeah.
Our tickets together for the two of us ended up being $40.
Oh, wow.
Not a cheap date anymore.
Yeah,
No. I guess, can I go next?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I went to see this at the Cinemark 16 in Dayton, and I got I went to the one screening theater that it was a multiplex, of course, the Cinemark, but I went to the room that said, Extreme Digital Cinema XD, and it had this thing over the entrance to the room. So I went to see it in a really awesome screen. I sat down in these loungers. There were a couple loungers, and I sat down, and you could press the buttons and raise your legs and lay back and just watch the movie. So, wow, what an experience to go back to the theaters. It's been, I think, almost 2 years since I had entered a movie theater. And so what a return it was. I was really looking forward to seeing this in the movie theater. I know for a fact that right now that's the only way you can watch the movie. So it's in the theaters. There's no streaming platforms playing it right now. There might be some on-demand offers after at least 17 days, I think, because of the Universal deal. But overall, I was stoked. I was really excited about this. This movie was delayed so many times, right? I mean, we've been covering this since January.
A whole year.
Yeah, and longer than that.
And we
started talking about it in 2019 or even before that, in 2018.
In the opening of the movie, they talk about present day 2019. I mean, and that seeing that hit me, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that's right. How long have we been talking about this movie?
Wow.
Since 2018, when we found out it was going to be made, and then in 2019, Rob wrote an article. Yeah, no, it hasn't dated at all. I think it's really, it's going to be relevant for a long time. And so I remember when Rob wrote an article saying that at the time it was going to be Lakeith Stanfield from Get Out was going to play Anthony in the new film. He was one of the actors from Get Out. I think he's the guy who. He's the guy who yells out "Get out" in a scene when his nose starts bleeding with the flash photography. But then eventually he had been in talks to be the main character, and then I think they went with Yahya Mateen, who is an amazing, amazing presence in the movie. I think he's really good in this. I had a great fun time. I went there with my wife Sarah, and we saw the movie. Like Catalina said, I enjoy the direction of the film. I love the lighting. I love the special effects and the subtlety of some of the scenes, as well as some of the viscerality of other scenes that happen in the movie. I was very, very excited about it, and I enjoyed it a lot. It was really, really good. And the way that they connected it to the first movie, so good, so rewarding, so satisfying, because I just felt like, oh, yeah, this is not just like, let's reimagine the whole thing. It's like, oh, my God, they're talking about – and if you've seen the trailers, this is not very spoilery, but, Helen Lyle is referenced by name, and, there's a whole bunch of connections to the first movie. So I had a really fun time with it.
I felt the same way. I went in there, wanting to not have any expectations. I haven't put a lot of effort into watching the trailers and stuff because I wanted to just see it fresh and not let I didn't read any reviews. I didn't want anybody to tell me what to think about it. I just wanted to. Yeah. So I went in there and it was I saw the Thursday screening, which I didn't know that there were any, but I guess there were some. But I got to see it at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday. And not very many people were in the theater. I think maybe like 6 other people besides me.
Wow.
It was amazing. It was really good. I was kind of literally on the edge of my seat the whole time watching it. It felt, in a way, grittier than the original Candyman. Maybe that's more the music. I mean, because we don't have this like grand Philip Glass score on it like the original did.
Sure, yeah. We have the soundtrack from his name is Robert Ike Aubrey Lowe. He's the guy who composed the soundtrack for this movie, and it's really amazing. I have some links here for the show notes. He's been a composer for almost 20 years, and he had some amazing performers record for this soundtrack. So what a cool it hasn't been released yet. I was looking around for it, looking on Spotify. I think Waxworks is announcing, that it's going to be out this month.
On
the soundtrack.
Vinyl,
yeah. So I'm going to keep an eye out for that.
So, and I thought,
as a horror film, would you guys call it a horror film?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It is definitely a horror film. There are some of the kills that kind of are implied. They pull back and you hear it. Just to this. You're just to this left. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, that sound design is amazing. It's so chunky.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really chunky.
Yeah. But yeah. I mean, I think that it was a great movie, and
is it scary?
By far,
does it deliver scares?
It is scary, and to me, it is by far the best Candyman sequel, and I think it really does the original movie proud.
Sure, I agree 100% with that. Yeah, I like the expansion that they do. They do a little bit of expansion to the mythology of Candyman, to the reasoning behind the legend of Candyman. They do a lot of expansion on that, which I think was very interesting. They really turned Candyman into this monolithic figure that's not just limited to one particular ghost, right?
Right.
This is,
I think
that becomes a little spoilery.
Yes,
sorry, but he becomes more in the original story. Candyman was kind of like an urban legend come to life. He was not, of course, Daniel Robitaille. He was not the spirit of revenge of Daniel Robitaille. He was just more like this thing that people, when Typhoid Mary, well, she was an actual person, but there's the urban legend that if you see Typhoid Mary in front of a mirror, that she's going to show up and kill you. Or there are these little urban myths that sometimes are used to scare kids, right? I don't know if you guys had any growing up, but Ed, we talked about last episode.
Halloween candy and stuff, yeah.
We talked about last episode. We were doing the theater play for Colossus, and we mentioned Goya's painting of the Coco, which was like a boogeyman for like Hispanic kids. And you said that you scared one of your little cousins or something with the Coco. You said the Coco is coming to get you. So the Coco is kind of like a Candyman, and it's in the sense
Absolutely.
Yeah. When I was growing up, this is kind of a stupid thing to tell a kid, but in order for parents to like scare their kids into being behave properly, they would say, if you don't behave, the man with the bag will come and it will take you away in the bag. And
no.
Santa Claus?
No, just a man with a bag. He's going to come and take you away from us. And I remember one time, God bless her, my mom. I was having a tantrum. I was a single digit kid. I was probably like 5 or 6. And I was like throwing a tantrum because I wanted something off the pastry shop. And she pointed at a guy with a bag from the other side of the road and said, "See, there's the bag, man, if you don't behave." And I was like, oh, shit. Let's call the police on that guy then. So, yeah, there are things like that, right? And
right.
I don't know where those things come from, but sometimes they come from like a particular person that lived at one time, and then it's just subverted and perverted into this like scary story.
Yeah, like the telephone game where it changes from person to person as they repeat the story. It slightly changes.
Yeah. Did you have anything like that growing up, Catalina?
I don't know, just the regular devil. I was raised Southern Baptist, so just generally being afraid of the end of the world and, going to hell for literally anything. I think that probably is good enough.
Sure, yeah.
I was Catholic upbringing.
Yeah, same here. But Catholic light in terms of being European Catholic, not American Catholic. But but there are these little weird stories, right? There's like
Halloween, especially relating to Halloween and stuff too.
Yeah, there's things that are almost untranslatable from different languages. But in Portugal, we have this saying, like, if you're doing something that's putting you at risk, or that's something reckless, that we have a saying that's kind of hard to translate, but it's basically like, man, you're gonna head off to the one-armed man if you keep doing that. And it's is
that like the Grim Reaper or something? The one-armed?
No, it's one of those things that you say almost without thinking about why you're saying it. But then my brother and I, well, it kind of sounds like that, right? But it just kind of preys on this fear. Apparently, my brother and I looked it up. We found out that it refers to a French general during the Napoleonic invasion of Spain and Portugal. There was a one-armed general who was known for being particularly cruel to war prisoners.
Wow.
And so that thing has lasted for over 200 years.
Wow, he would make a great Candyman.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, that does make sense though, because I am glad that I don't know if this is spoilery or not, but I feel like they did a really good job talking about pain that is culturally, that's part of a culture and that stays within a culture, and it's kind of like woven within your cultural
like collective unconscious.
Your collective unconscious. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
That's where it was.
Yeah, and sometimes it's based on race, nationality, or even politics. I mean, for example, that you're going to the one-armed man has to do with a little bit of that xenophobia from the Napoleonic Wars about, a French general, and he was an invading force, an oppressor, and there's always a little bit. He was called Manet, and to this day, one of the most ableist slurs for a one-armed person is manita, which comes from the name Manet. Oh. So that's how deep it got involved in the subconscious, I guess. It's kind of strange and weird,
That's really interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Like Freddy Krueger of Portugal.
Sure. And there's things that sometimes have this loaded history in it that people just kind of take for granted and don't even remember. I was reading in the Candyman website, there is a syllabus that you can download. And one of the activities they have there about this, and I've never seen a movie have such an involved release like this, they have a task sheet. And one of the things that they say is, hey, you should try discussing with other people certain sayings like eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or fuzzy wuzzy, because they're loaded with this. They come from a place of.
They have more meaning behind it.
Yeah, they have more of a racist meaning than people usually give it credit for. Some people say, oh, I'm feeling so fuzzy wuzzy today. Fuzzy wuzzy was a slur about these soldiers, African soldiers, and it was making fun of their hair because their hair was like poofy and kind of fuzzy,
like the Buffalo Soldiers.
Yeah, well, no, it goes.
I'm gonna get the song in my head.
Yeah, it goes beyond that, but fuzzy wuzzy was kind of like a problematic description. It was used as kind of a slur, and now to this day, we still use it sometimes,
and we don't know what it came from or what it means.
Exactly. Yeah. Like or eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by its toe. It didn't used to be tiger that they said. So,
And even the Three Stooges, I think, use that, in their little skits.
Oh, shit. Sure, because they got a guy called Mo, so that makes sense.
Well, those of us that grew up in a certain era in the Midwest remember the Davy Crockett song I can't sing.
Yeah.
Davy,
sure.
Don't do it.
The Wild Frontier.
Yeah.
Boomer.
So the first, a little short synopsis of the movie, I think, is that Anthony is a painter. He has a girlfriend who he lives with, and she is like a gallery administrator.
Yeah, Brianna Cartwright.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and they have some friends over, and this is just happening in the first 5 minutes of the film, so there's no big spoilers here, but. A friend of theirs called Troy, played by Nathan Stewart Jarrett. He tells him the story of Candyman, and this is the first connection to the first movie, where he says,
is Brianna's brother.
Yeah, he's a brother.
And does he repeat it? And when you see flashbacks or anything, or how does it?
No, the way all Candyman stories are told is through those shadow puppet things that we saw in the trailer.
So those are dispersed out throughout the film.
Yeah,
they are. Yeah. They are. It's really good work. And I was trying to find out.
I'm glad that they made that conscious choice to do it that way, because I felt that it was less about black violence and more about
symbology.
The pain that came from it.
Right. To put it in sort of a monochrome, the way that they did. Yeah.
I love stop motion animation and puppetry and all that kind of stuff. So stylistically, I think that's a great choice.
So all the characters were sort of like black cutout
shadow puppets.
Shadow puppets.
Yeah, and they were puppeted, paper constructions, right, on like a kind of a yellowy background is how I remember them all.
I love stuff like that. I was a big collector I have short films and, things like that where they have them on rods and stuff and they can move, they're pivotable and things.
And
yeah.
Go ahead.
So those shadow puppets, I'm actually looking at the website of the company that designed and made those. It's from a company called Manual Cinema. So I will put this. I will put this on the show notes. It was so great, such good work. All the little histories of Candyman and the myths and Helen, the story of Helen, all that stuff being shown. And I'm sure there's stuff that didn't even make it in the movie, but we saw in that promotional material that was coming out. So, I'm sure this is going to be a great extra for the Blu-ray.
More to explore.
And before we get into the spoilers, I wanted to mention, Catalina, you brought this to our attention, the Candyman movie website put up a final trailer, but the only way that you could watch the final trailer was turning on your microphone and saying Candyman into the microphone 5 times.
What a great marketing idea.
I haven't done it.
I did do it yesterday. And it takes a while for it to load if you're using your phone. I'm assuming most people would use your phone because, it has the camera on it.
Yeah.
And each time you say Candyman, the screen appears to be more and more broken, and then more
like a mirror, like a broken mirror.
It's pretty cool. I thought it was really fun.
Wow.
Be sure to be very clear. If you're going to do it, be sure to be very clear when you're saying Candyman, because I had music on in the background and it wasn't picking it up.
Oh.
So I had to do it like 2 or 3 times, and I ended up having to say Candyman like 30 times.
Candyman's in the background going, what was that? What'd you say? What? I can't understand you.
Just like Pinhead is trapped in the box in Hellraiser 9, trying to see if someone's going to open the box. No, sorry, that was a quick reference.
Dumb.
Yeah.
Also, it's funny because, I wonder how people are going to actually feel. It's like, did it make your hackles rise, Catalina, when you were saying it and you're thinking to yourself like, I don't know, this really, maybe not such a good idea,
Okay, so no, it's really funny. And actually, I don't believe that I've told Ryan or Jose this story. I think Joe is probably the only person who actually knows about this. But when I was a kid, okay, so in 1992, I was actually 4.
Oh.
But the first time that I actually ran into the whole idea of Candyman was when I was in 2nd grade. So I was probably about 7, so it'd been out for a few years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least the first one. The original had been out. And my friends, and it was all, of course, everyone's talking about Bloody Mary. And it's, you go in there and you say Bloody Mary and you scare yourself a little bit. But the idea of Candyman, the way my friends told it to me, was so absolutely terrifying to me that I just refused. My friends would try to play Candyman in the bathroom and I was just like, no. So yeah, now that I'm an adult, I'm just kind of it's fun. We're having fun.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. And
you have a kid, right? Would you scare your kid? Would they know about Candyman?
No, she's really into Bloody Mary right now. We don't. I don't know. With the new one now out, and
it's going to enter the 3rd grade. Consciousness.
Yeah, I have no idea if it's going to be talked about in schools again.
Halloween.
I don't want to plant that idea in her head, though. I'm going to stay out of that.
Halloween.
Sure.
Halloween is coming.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're really super protective. I mean, we just started watching Stranger Things, and after every episode, I'm sitting down with her and I'm like, "Do we need to talk about this? Let's talk about this."
How old is she?
She's 8.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's a great age.
My son is 10, and he won't watch TV shows or movies at all, any of them. Any of the kind of emotional manipulation that they do, he just can't take it. He doesn't.
Yeah. I in terms of Mexican culture, you have the La Llorona, the ghost of the crying lady. You have El Coco. In Brazil, they have what's called the cuca, which is like a female alligator that steals kids and puts them in like a bag. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. It's like, and then in places like Peru and Bolivia, they have the pish taco. It's not fish taco. It's pish taco. And it's a pale-skinned vampire. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that stuff. I like the gongsi hopping vampires too.
I know. I should put one of those in a puppet film.
Oh yeah.
When I was 4, my mom woke me up out of bed on Saturday night and said, "Come and watch a spook show with me." And we watched Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. And that was my first horror movie. And then we watched The Haunting. And that was in black and white. And my mom squeezed my hand so hard in that scene because she loved that. Like where the 2 ladies are in the room, and the door is breathing. And she's like, "Stop squeezing my hand so hard."
The Haunting of Hill House?
Yeah.
No, not Hill House. No.
I love that one too, though. That's got Roddy McDowall. That's a great one.
But my mom thought that was, she loved Halloween and she was like, never protected me from anything.
Shirley Jackson wrote the Haunting. But anyway, so let's get into spoilers.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been kind of handcuffing us a little bit. Okay, so anybody out there that has not seen the movie, you should pause the episode now and go to the theater and watch it. Yeah.
And then come back and listen later.
Yeah.
So if you haven't watched it yet, this podcast having no beginning will have no end. Yada yada. Go watch the movie.
You make me stop editing if you say that.
Okay. You're at the 29-33 minute mark. There you go.
Yeah.
In the call, yeah. So let's get into spoiler territory. Let her rip. You've had your warning.
So one thing, what I would want to say about that is the trajectory of the Candyman sequels previously was that if you break Candyman's stuff, then you destroy him, right? In Candyman 2, it was his mirror. And in Candyman 3, it's like, oh, no, it's not the mirror. We got to rip up his paintings.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm so glad that they abandoned that sort of hokey slasher, Horcrux.
That's kind of like the Amityville films. I worked on an Amityville film where it was like the house was destroyed, but they had artifacts left over, like a mirror.
Yeah, so it's like thank God they didn't go Candyman 4, we got to melt down his hook. Or Candyman 5, we found the original beehive, and we got to burn it.
Or that fur on the collar. We have the collar of the fur.
That would have been funny, though, the original beehive.
Yeah.
Can I connect that to the fear and the terror of Africanized bees?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's even movies made out of that.
Killer bees.
Yeah.
Expect the killer bees.
Exactly.
But this movie kind of, in a way, is even more faithful to the Forbidden in that it says, when they tease us in the trailer by saying Candyman is not a man, Candyman is the whole hive. It's something like that, right? And
he's the whole damn hive.
Yeah, the whole damn hive. And so what they're saying is that Candyman is this sort of collective spirit of suffering and racial injustice and stuff like that, and
he's the source, but there's a bunch of drones of the source,
and there's a bunch of Candyman stories of these poor, mistreated people that add to the power of the collective story of Candyman. So Daniel Robitaille, they honor him by saying he's the first, right? But the one who is kind of more the star of this movie is a character called Sherman Fields.
Yeah, Sherman. Mm-hmm. It's almost like the same thing keeps repeating, right? So like you said, we see these little shadow puppets throughout the movie, and they bring up not just fictitious characters, but also real people who are lynched or killed or murdered by police or whatever. There's several that we see. Like there's a little kid on a bike, and that little kid is George Steiny Jr. He was the first child to be sentenced to the electric chair when he was 14, with a horrible trial that was eventually vacated.
Well, I think we made that connection before, but they expanded that in the movie, and they showed him being dragged behind a car until he died.
That is another person. That is actually James Byrd Jr.
With the shadow puppets?
Yeah, they do all those with the shadow puppets. And they have like several extended sequences at the end during the credits. During the credit sequence.
Yeah, the man being dragged.
That's pretty well done because it's truly horrifying things that they're real
that's a very
things that have happened.
That's a good way to do it.
The man who was dragged with a pickup truck is actually James Byrd Jr., who was murdered in 1998 by two Aryan Nation racist guys who had tattoos of black man hanged in their arms and stuff like that. So they basically just like beat him up, tied him to a pickup truck, dragged him for miles, and then dropped off his body in front of a black church. So there are those things in the movie. And Coleman Domingo playing Burke in this movie, he's the guy who – so I guess this is going to be a little bit of a quick synopsis of the film. Very spoilery, bear with me. So Yahya Mateen plays Anthony. He's an artist. He's kind of stuck in kind of this – he's not sure what his voice is in terms of artistic, expression. He's being kind of pressured into like coming up with something new because, we got to give the people that go to the galleries what they want.
In a way, there's kind of this – it was a lot like the Midnight Meat Train film adaptation. Getting dragged into the
photographer
into the depths of a world that he doesn't understand.
Sure. And then there's Brooke Shields, the gallery owner, who says, you got to give me something snappier and whatever. Yeah. So he tries to get something grittier.
The actress, Brooke Shields?
Yeah, she's in the Midnight Meat Train with Bradley Cooper.
Okay. Not in this.
Yeah.
No.
And so here the gallery guy is doing a group showing. And he's giving Anthony a chance to be in that group showing because of his rich, influential girlfriend. There's a lot of stuff about gentrification about this too, like the initial opening scenes when they're in the new apartment that they're moving into, and it's a fancy looking apartment, and they're talking about, the prices of the apartment. When he comes out of the apartment, there's like a billboard talking about new apartments for sale. You see all sorts of like cranes building stuff in Chicago. So that is always there, that cities are these changing environments where old history is knocked down. Poor areas like ghettos and stuff get demolished.
Green.
Exactly. They actually filmed some of this stuff in the last remaining houses of Cabrini Green, which I think was mostly demolished when Rahm Emanuel was the mayor of Chicago. But so there's some great locations in this. But so he's kind of in this trying to come out of this slump artistically. And when Brianna's brother tells him about Candyman and brings up the history of Helen Lyle, makes her the killer, makes her the killer, and says that she's the one who basically tried to kill the baby, and the people killed her and took the baby from her, and she walked back into the fire, which is.
Isn't she blamed for Trevor's death and stuff too, and things like that?
They didn't mention that in the.
They didn't mention Trevor.
No. They just stop at the part where she goes back into the fire and she dies. And this is part of the game of telephone of urban myths, right? Of urban legends. Right, it's that we have a saying in Portugal, which is whoever tells a story adds a point to it, adds a period to it. So, you just keep adding stuff. So this is kind of what draws Anthony into this whole Candyman thing. And he's in bed, he's looking at his phone like, I guess Helen really did kill that Doberman. He's like looking around and stuff and doing research. And so he starts getting deeper into that myth. And he finds himself going to Cabrini Green with a camera because he wants to know more about the place and whatever. So he goes in and he finds this guy called Burke. And Burke is this kid, this guy that we see in the beginning opening sequence of the movie is the whole story of Sherman Fields and how he got caught by the police because this kid going to the laundry in Cabrini Green back in the 70s or whatever, he found this guy hiding from the police in the wall, and he came out of the wall and offered him candy, and he yelled, and he had a hook for a hand. So the police came in and basically killed him right there in the basement.
But it wasn't like a meat hook like Candyman.
No, it was like a prosthetic hook, a prosthetic
hook.
Like
he was a veteran or something.
Yeah, that he can grab things and stuff, yeah. So he finds Burke, and he's like, hey, you want to know more about the neighborhood? And it's like, yeah. He's like, tell me about Helen Lyle. And then, Burke tells him about Helen Lyle and says she was looking for Candyman. And that's when he gets into the story of Candyman. So this starts Anthony in this kind of spiral. And I'm not going to say any more for now, but that's basically how the movie directs us into the myth through this retelling by the third party of the whole legend of it, and kind of draws you into it.
Which I really liked, because I think that I don't remember who mentioned earlier that it was closer to the forbidden, that it glorifying this whole idea that a story itself can have so much impact, and by adding this extra layer to it, it just adds more, I guess believability to the story itself. It adds more weight to the story itself.
And it creates power, like supernatural power, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And this the thing I want to bring up is that the first Candyman was told almost through like a white person point of view, because it focuses on Helen. So that makes her the victim. It makes her the person that is, immersing herself into black culture and the neighborhood of Cabrini Green, against her fear that something's going to happen to her because she's getting into an area
which mimics and mirrors the love affair between Daniel Robitaille and the white woman in the second film in the history.
Right. Rather
when Candyman appears, sure. Yeah. But there's always this presence of fear of black people in public spaces. There's always this idea that, I don't want to go to the wrong side of the tracks. Yeah, the big black man, basically that's what Candyman is.
Right, and they do make they make it really scary the first time she goes into Cabrini Green. And in reality, she's just walking into a housing project. I mean,
But it was scary.
It was scary,
they had that horrible bathroom, and they had, all the gangs and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, ironically, myself and, the editor of Cenobium, on a trip across the United States by car, we stopped at Cabrini Green right around the time. It was in 1991 or 92 when we were attending 92. We were attending a convention in Chicago, and Doug Bradley was the guest, as the judge of the costume contest. And we wanted to go check out Cabrini Green, so we stopped and we videoed it and stuff.
Wow.
And you did get an interview with Bill Condon, the director of Candyman 2, which we put up on the blog. So I do recommend people go check it out. We'll add that to the show notes as well. It explains a lot about this idea that maybe some people have escaped this, but the second movie, when we see even though it takes place in New Orleans, when we see the murder of Daniel Robitaille, it is supposed to be in a place called Helltown, which was this kind of place where Cabrini Green eventually was built, and it was supposed to be in Chicago. Yeah. So this is a haunted place, right? This is a haunted place. It's a place of,
Yeah, like supernatural elements like crisscross and, like almost kind of like the Books of Blood idea that, these ghosts all are on the highway here or something,
Did you guys find yourselves sort of mentally urging Anthony, just go talk to your mom. Just go talk to your mom. And I thought that was going to happen way sooner in the movie, but it was like
that is set up.
3/4 of the way in, yeah.
That is set up a lot. Like one of the early scenes has his girlfriend tell him, hey, don't forget that thing at 7:00 with your mom. You should call her. And then he's painting, like he's possessed by this idea of painting like a series of paintings about Candyman. So you see his phone ringing and it says mom, and he's not answering.
Yeah.
And ultimately, maybe like 2/3 into the movie, that's when he actually goes to talk to his mother in person. But, we're jumping ahead a bit. So yeah, there's something there being set up. And it has a big payoff in the third act of the film. But yeah, there's this he's
geographical locations.
Yeah. There's a big parallel between Anthony and Helen Lyle, because he too is going into Cabrini Green with a camera, taking pictures of graffiti and finding out more about Candyman. So in a way, it is just like the first movie. He's now Helen Lyle in this story.
Yeah,
right.
She was doing research for a paper or a thesis, and he's doing artistic research.
Research, exactly, yeah. So in that way, when people complain, well, when they do a reboot or a sequel, sometimes they just go by the old formula. It kind of, you could be constructing it like that in this case, even though I just realized that later after I watched the movie, that was very similar to the first movie. But in any case, it's done in a completely different experience, which is the experience of a black guy doing that.
Yeah.
So
and also it's he's being driven that way by this mysterious character, William Burke, right? But played by Coleman Domingo. And we find out into the movie that he has an ulterior motive for drawing him into this Candyman myth and world.
Yeah.
And I went into this being 99% sure that Anthony was baby Anthony, from Candyman, from the first movie.
Well, even the trailers and I think some, leaks to the internet revealed that.
Yeah. So that's why in my mind, I was like, geez, just talk to your mom. She's going to tell you the truth. And but by the time he gets to her, he's so deep in it. I mean, and there's a body horror element to this, right? Because when he first approaches this church and takes a picture of it with his camera, a bee comes over and stings him on his hand. And that bee sting sort of necrotizes his hand and
it festers.
Yeah, and that spreads up his arm and all the way and up his neck and up the side of his face. He's got all these
almost cancerous, cancer.
His right hand, and he is a painter just like Daniel Robitaille.
And the right hand is the one they sawed off too.
And it's all and it's all pockmarked with these holes that almost look like a beehive.
Right, yes. The holes are very, very hexagonal.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
But it's really subtle, too. I mean, it's one of those things that just kind of builds on itself. Like, when I was watching it and then the bee sting first happens, I was like, oh, okay, cute bee sting. And then as the movie progresses and his arm gets more and more necrotic, and then by the time you get to the end and he's got everything going on with his face, I was like, oh, man, that is really cool how they had planned that.
And when he gets stung by the bee, as we know, bees die when they sting, so the bee falls to the ground, and immediately a walking path of black ants grabs the bee and takes it away. Yeah, it's a really cool shot. The black ants just grabbing the bee and taking it away.
I've heard a couple of reviews online, and one of them mentioned the thing about this hand, rotting and stuff, and it's like it was referred to similar to Brundlefly.
Oh, there are some moments where I definitely thought that. I whispered that
body
to Sarah.
Horror, David.
Because there's as his hand kind of gets more desiccated.
You sounded like a robot for a bit there.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Command.
The Brundlefly moment, right? There's a part where he's looking at his hand that's getting more decayed, and he actually pulls one of his nails out, and I turned to Sarah and I said, oh, that's a Brundlefly moment. So, yeah that's pretty cool.
That was tough to watch,
moving along. Once he talked to Burke, he starts getting this idea that to give the gallery owner what he wants, he's going to come up with like a painting about Candyman. And he names the painting, Say His Name, which is, of course, a direct reference to, the hashtag Say Her Name about Breonna Taylor and, the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And in this case, he makes a painting of these hands, right? These hands covered in fire or something. They're enclosed in like a mirror doors. So in the gallery, you have to look at the mirror, open it, and then you're invited when you look at the work to say Candyman's name 5 times in a mirror. So
I feel like the mirror. Sorry, real fast. I feel like the mirror itself looked like a medicine cabinet.
It does.
Like when Helen opens the medicine cabinet and you see into the other apartment, I felt that mirror was like an updated medicine cabinet.
Which I think is based on a true story
so
of how somebody actually murdered someone by coming through the wall of an apartment like that.
It is, yeah. So there's an art critic there. She's like a white blonde lady, and she's kind of looking around. And there's also this thing about the art world. They kind of put it in this very lionizing kind of way, where it's like people are in the art world seem to be very beholden to gallery owners and critics. And at the same time,
Finley Stevens is the character's name.
Yeah, and so Anthony is standing by his painting and he sees her. He goes to talk to her and he starts talking about the theme of the painting and explaining. He just starts going off this explanation of like, oh, the underlying, blah, blah, blah of gentrification and urban legend. It's like, and you can see the critic is like, you're just trying to be smug.
Eyes are glazing over.
Yeah. And then the critic is like, your kind is also responsible for this gentrification. It says your kind. And she's like, artists go into like decrepit areas of the city to get big lofts to dick around and make their paintings in. And, you're part of this gentrification gentrification process, So he gets a little mad at that misinterpretation and how he feels like he's been rejected by this critic. So he gets drunk and he makes a scene at the gallery and kind of calls the gallery owner a bitch and leaves.
I hated that. I was complaining about her all night, the art critic, because she was just plain awful, like an awful human being, I think, just completely. Although, like, Joe and I ended up getting in a conversation about Critic in general, about how, like, this woman, she hadn't created anything at all, but she felt that it was completely okay to guffaw at his work and say he didn't understand what he was talking about, which is really, really wrong. I mean, like, I think that this person obviously is an artist. He obviously cared very much so about his work, and she didn't even want to hear about it because she heard, here's your take on gentrification. I've already heard it. And I guess that is something that is an issue in the art world. I don't really know. I mean, I think it is definitely an issue in the film world where people don't want to hear what other people have to say.
Oh, yeah.
Nina's an artist.
True. Yeah, very true. I think you put it beautifully. Yeah.
I thought that Brianna Cartwright, that character, Anthony's girlfriend, was a much better character. And I kept thinking through the whole movie, please don't kill Brianna. She's so cool. She was so much better than like the Finley Stevens character.
She is.
Oh, yeah. She had a lot of depth.
Yeah, but there's a few moments where you kind of feel like there's a certain kind of pursuing like upward mobility in the art world, and she's just trying to give the powerful white critics and art gallery owners what they want.
The gatekeepers.
Yeah, she's trying to gain the trust of the gatekeepers, trying to act like
she wants to rise in her
She wants to rise in, yeah.
Right,
and then all of a sudden
successful, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, but there's a part where they kind of hint at a certain kind of jealousy between her and Anthony, because Anthony starts getting a lot of attention after the gallery owner gets murdered in front of his painting, which it's an amazing scene. We saw this in one of the trailers and one of the previews. And
that gallery owner's name is Clive.
Yes.
Clive Privler.
I wonder, like, ironically, talking about the art scene and galleries and the whole, universe of art and, commerce and everything. That's a very interesting, take, for this.
No, I don't think not necessarily, because as someone mentioned earlier, Daniel Robitaille was an artist as well.
Right. What I mean is like how corrupt the world of art has become today. Modern.
It's a money laundering business in a lot of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is definitely this painting of the critic as kind of like a vulture, because as soon as the murder happens, she gets immediately interested in writing an article about him because there was a murder.
Anyways, I was just going to say that the art world and the scene, Clive, obviously as a gallery showing person, knows a lot about that corruption and the whole world of that. And I think in a way, it was a great opportunity, for them to make some comments about that. Anyways, I'm just saying that, that art world, I know something about it. Nina knows something about it. Clive knows a ton about it. I'm sure you, Catalina, do. It's a corrupt scene. Like there's so many galleries that, it doesn't matter how good you are, it matters if they can sell and make a ton of money off of you. That's what it's all about.
Sure,
you have,
of course.
Intended, a hook.
So, and back to what Jose was saying, this Finley Stevens completely flipped, her opinion. And she acted like, oh no, she acted like she never had that, condescending conversation with him before. Like, oh no, I love your stuff.
She will go any way the wind blows if it makes money or rises.
Right, exactly. But I feel like part of what was the issue with Brianna is that, like, at the very, very beginning of the movie, they keep on making jokes or, like, poking fun at her about how her boyfriend doesn't work. Like Anthony, he hasn't had a show in a long time, but she's obviously incredibly educated. She knows what she's doing. She has a great job. She's supportive. She kind of like shoehorns him into this gallery, specifically into this gallery show. And then when those people die in front of his artwork, all of a sudden, he is pushed into this popularity. Right, exactly. He's pushed into this popularity, but it never would have happened without her. So, like, obviously a little bit of jealousy about that, but also it's suspicious as what, man? Like, these murders where these people were killed by this hook, happens right in front. It looks kind of bad, like for real. And if you're in a new relationship, I don't know, if I were me, I'd be like, oh my God, did my boyfriend kill me?
Red flag.
Yeah.
And his spiral kind of went so fast that that there really wasn't a lot of attention paid to this suspicion of, him or the police investigation or anything like that. It all, by the time the police catch up to him, it's all, everything looks pretty. He's already got a hook for a hand and his face is messed up.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
There's a dead guy next to him. And
this isn't what it looks like.
It's not what it looks like.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah. But it does spiral really quickly. I personally think that maybe it spiraled quickly because Anthony had already been predisposed to fall into this whole world. He had been fed. I mean, Candyman had been feeding him. Right, exactly. Candyman had been feeding him that honey. And then
that's right. He was missing for like a month or something.
Yeah, he was missing. Right, he was missing. He's the baby. The Candyman had been feeding him honey, like from his fingers and stuff.
That's correct. I remember that. Yeah.
I thought it was actually his blood that he pokes with the hook.
Could have been a mixture. It
might have been the blood.
I rewatched that scene, and I have actually a screenshot of that. That's. Of course, we already said he's baby Anthony, but there's a scene where Helen is kind of hallucinating, and we go into that church, and there's an altar, and the baby is there, and then we see the hook come in with a hand, and I think it kind of pokes the finger and then gives it to little baby Anthony to suck on. So now there's a physical connection between them.
Right.
Blood, like I didn't know it was blood.
He's like a modern day Black Dracula in a way.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because he's giving him the blood to drink. Like here's my blood, and now you are a vampire too,
And speaking of that, you brought the black vampire. I mean, one of the things that both Nia DaCosta and Peele have said about this, which something that I did not experience myself or experience it as a kid because I was already a certain age when the first Candyman came out. So I was born in 1976. But is that there are people who grew up with Candyman and it became part of their culture, their teenage culture, right? Especially black people, because they say, when
the younger, the more, I would have said.
Yeah, like Nia DaCosta was saying, when I was a kid, we heard about Candyman, about the movie, and then my friends were talking about, saying Candyman's name 5 times in the mirror, and I wouldn't do it because I was scared. And so, in a way, what Clive wanted to do with the story and what Bernard Rose wanted to do with the story did reach that generation that lives in this fairy tale world.
A new urban myth.
It became a new urban myth. And at the same time, there were no major black horror figures at the time, except for maybe Blackula, I guess.
Well, I mean, there are others, but you'd have to stretch. Like, for instance, even Tony Todd played the hero in a zombie remake, the original Night of the Dead, Living Dead was remade in color. And he got to be the hero.
But there were no black boogeyman. I mean, in some ways, socially, the black man was always a boogeyman for some people.
Especially a cool one like Pinhead.
Yeah.
Like that.
Right. Or a Black Freddy or whatever. That Peele even mentions that in one of the featurettes. There was no Black Freddy. There was no black Michael Myers, and then all of a sudden there was Candyman. So very interesting.
Yeah. When that first movie came out and I read The Forbidden right before I went to the theater to watch that, and seeing Tony Todd reading the lines right out of The Forbidden with that sort of hypnotic, booming, echoey voice was
really
like,
nice.
Oh my God, I am in. I love this movie.
Me too. I loved it too, especially the music. I was going to ask you guys about in this film, how does the music contribute as it did in the first?
Very much.
I'd need to see it again to me it wasn't as powerful, and maybe that's just because I just need to spend more time with it.
Philip Glass is amazing. I mean, I just was blown away.
Well, that's the difference is the reviews we've watched the last 12 hours or 24 hours, people haven't talked about the music, but with the first Candyman, everyone talked about the music.
Yeah.
It was very impressive.
Well, when you go into the theater and the first thing you see is this cool aerial view and that music is blasting, it's just, it really makes you remember.
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, this is not about the music, but you brought up the aerial view. The opening sequence for this one is looking up from below.
At an angle.
Which I thought, at an
That's
angle.
Interesting.
Which was
That's
really
interesting.
Beautifully done, I felt.
And
to upend the original.
And we didn't talk about this already. This is
mirrored.
This is funny. Yeah, the opening of the movie plays a remake of that old Candyman song from the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Right, Candyman.
But not only that, but every single
singing, I think.
Every single logo in the
Anthony Newley.
Every single logo in the movie, from the production companies to Universal to MGM, are all backwards, like mirror writing.
I was saying that. I guess I dropped off the call.
Yeah, Joe mentioned that that's just a Jordan Peele thing. He said that he did it in Get Out, and he did it in Us.
Interesting.
Which I just personally hadn't noticed.
Did he?
But I mean, he picks up on stuff like that.
Huh.
Cool. That's
really
cool.
Yeah,
so I'm not
I
sure
thought
that's
definitely
just a
had to do with the. It definitely had to do with the mirror idea of Candyman being in the mirror.
That was my takeaway from it.
And also, when I started seeing the images of the city as seen from below at an angle up, I thought at some point that they were filming a reflection of the city on a puddle. And I'm not sure if that was the case, but I definitely looked like there were little bubbles here and there in the middle of the shot and a little bit of trembling here and there. So I was like, are they shooting a mirror image of the city on a puddle as they move the camera? So I wasn't sure about that, but definitely that was cool. And I guess you guys lost me for a moment there.
I can't wait until we can do the audio commentary for this movie, because then we'll have time to really study it and
more information will come out. I'm sure you'll find articles and interviews and things. Like Joe was saying, he's got so much that he didn't have time to look at it all before the podcast began.
Yeah,
true.
The music was decent. I know that they did use. I feel like they used a little bit of Helen's theme, kind of like deep inside there every now and then. Mm-hmm. I was paying more attention to the sound design itself than the music personally.
Yeah.
Just because,
there's a lot of use of the double bass. They brought Robert Lowe, who made the soundtrack. He brought in a composer, award-winning composer, Hildur Guðnadóttir, known for scoring the HBO miniseries Chernobyl and the Joker for DC.
The movie,
also, I think she did some music for Get Out, Black Klansman, and Lovecraft Country. So she's the one who plays those like double bass, like when something happens, those sounds. There's a lot of stuff. I'll put some links in the show notes to at least one track from the soundtrack that was shared by the composer and some articles about that. And there's also this kind of droney kind of electronic background music that they do, which is adds a lot to the tension sometimes.
Okay, so tell us more about the plot. We're up to the point now where his hand is infested and right.
Yeah, so after that murder, he just gets possessed and starts painting like a whole series of paintings. In fact, when he's talking to that critic who's making an article about his work and the painting, he tells her that he's planning on doing a whole series, because she asks him, what's in the future for you? He's like, well, I'm doing a whole series of Candyman. And she's like, oh, okay. And then he kind of prods her a little bit and says, if you really want to understand this Candyman thing, you should say it. Say his name in the mirror 5 times.
Yeah,
that's how you really get into
thing to do to her.
Yeah,
she was awful. She was awful. When immediately after their first discussion, like when she was so dismissive of his own personal artwork in the gallery, I leaned over to Joe and was like, I can't wait until she dies. I can't wait for her to
Yeah,
like,
I think he also says that to her, because she also comes up with some babble about the work and what some fancy like schmancy stuff.
At the point that he tells her that she should do it, he has seen Candyman in mirrors and stuff already. So he's not like, just messing around, or, he's not just, he believes it at that point. So he's cursing her when he says that.
I'm sorry, but how rude she was to him, you don't know how awful she is to all these other people. And she's a very important critic, right? So, like, how do we know she hasn't gone around and destroyed artist after artist just because people think that her opinion is important?
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
Like,
she is a gatekeeper.
I don't feel bad for her at all.
Right, exactly. She is a gatekeeper. She's kind of a vulture, and all of a sudden, Anthony has this key that he can use to bust open the gate. And that's why his face shows that he's a little uneasy with the conversation at one point, and that he kind of like doesn't like her. And that's when he brings up, you should say it. You should really get immersed into this thing, and say his name.
This movie
like I said, I feel like it's calling someone out. Like if these people, like this woman, she's, making light of it. She's saying she doesn't believe it. And that's fine. It's fine. She can say that and feel that way. But he's calling her out saying, okay, if you don't believe it, then just go ahead and say it. What's the harm?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, this is an audience thing, where it's a trope. We have to be given some people to hate so that when they die, we're like, yeah.
Well, and more to that point, this is the first time we see somebody actually saying Candyman's name into a mirror as a weapon. Right? I mean, there's a part,
the information, they're being given misinformation.
No.
Killed.
This is a later. There's a later part in the movie where Brianna is in a police car, and the police are super corrupt.
We're skipping to the end.
But anyways, I think that it's kind of like a superpower now. She's in the back of the car, and she can call Shazam, and Candyman appears.
We have to remember that when we get to the end, that Ryan has something specific to say about Brianna and them being in the cop car.
No, I mean just as a thing. So the murders do follow Anthony, and Anthony does start falling more into a spiral of this kind of madness and body horror, and then ultimately he finds himself completely disconnected from reality. Brianna kind of wants to rescue him from this spiral that he's in. She's kind of afraid of him at one point because they have an argument, and then I think at that point Anthony goes to the hospital because whatever's going on with his body lands him in the hospital.
So now we're finally at Anthony finally goes and talks to his mother, which is what Ryan said. He was like, just talk to your mom the whole time.
Yeah, and unfortunately at that point he is so far in it that he's got the pock marks and the, I guess it's like in between a burn and a honeycomb.
A brundlefly.
Going up the side of his face when he's talking to his mother, and she's like, what happened to you? And she's been, and we find out that there's been a pact that nobody from the original, from the time of that bonfire from Candyman, has been allowed to say Candyman's name.
What do you mean allowed to say?
They made a pact.
Everybody in Cabrini Green. Right, yeah. So, at the end of the movie where you had the big bonfire, and then they all went to Helen's funeral.
Yeah.
So what Anne-Marie says is she says that they've made a pact that those people
will
of Cabrini
never say that again.
Right, because they're not going to. They all realize that's where he finds his power, is it being summoned, or his name.
Like he says, his congregation.
Right.
Yeah, and so they made a pact together that they would never say the name again. And she says, now that there's all these murders, someone must have broken the pact. And we know who that is. It's William Burke.
Right.
What's his motive, though?
His motive,
okay, so
this is
it's several fold, I think, his motive.
I think they should have spent a little more time on him and his motive, because it goes by so fast.
It's unclear.
It's two things. No, it's okay. So when he was a child in 1977, he was partially him yelling and getting scared of, Hook Hand Man, who was living in the walls, is what caused this man to get beaten to death, basically in front of him. And he was like, 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in 77. And then, in 92, we have the events of what happened with Helen Lyle. So he was probably, and he still is in Cabrini Green to this day. So that means he probably was still living there in 92.
And he works and lives out of the laundromat.
Right. He works in a laundromat. He owns a laundromat. They also show you a flashback of when he was still a child, but maybe a little bit older than when the guy got murdered in front of him. He's probably 10, 11, and his sister gets killed by the Candyman. And he opens up the bathroom, and like his sister and her friend are dead inside the bathroom.
So they are like, no, we're playing a grown-up game. You can't join us. And they close the bathroom door, and they're chanting Candyman's name into the mirror.
And so one of the things in this movie is that there's a scene of a girl during the show in the beginning of the movie where the first Candyman theme painting is exhibited. She's got a backpack with a little bee thing on it, and she sees the painting, and then she goes to her school and she convinces like 4 of her friends to stand in front of the mirror in the high school and say the word Candyman.
Oh, that's where that moment comes from in the trailer.
In the
right?
trailer, exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's another little spiral thing that goes from like, okay, see, now he put that painting there, now other people are seeing it, and that legend is spreading out again. And so all these girls get murdered. There's one black girl who is in one stall, and she gets to see what happens, and Candyman, and there's all that stuff going on. I think Burke's, in my mind, like Ryan was saying, I think they could have explained a little bit more about his motivation, but I think what Burke's motivation to drag Anthony into this is, I don't know that he believed, I don't know how he found out that Anthony was baby Anthony, but he does know that Candyman needed a sacrifice. He needed a body. He needed to come back. And at the same time,
he does say he knew that the baby would come back.
Right. Yeah.
When they're in the church.
And maybe he was friends with Anthony's mother. I don't know. I wish we had known a little more about that.
Yeah. So the thing that confused me just a little bit, there's kind of 2 arms pulling me on either side. One is that the black community is afraid of Candyman because, Coleman saw his sister be murdered by Candyman, and then he looked and saw Sherman Fields in the bathroom mirror, like going, shh, and there's blood everywhere, and his sister is like laying on the floor, eviscerated. But at the same time, it seems like he has this different interpretation of Candyman as this traumatic event that kind of taints the fabric of reality, right? And he thinks that this is the way that people deal with the brutality and the injustice of black suffering, is to have this legend that comes to life and focuses that pain and that suffering into one point of revenge. So that's why he thinks that there's this thinning of the fabric when something really bad happens in that spot. Cabrini Green, Sherman Fields, other people who got killed by either lynched or murdered or killed by the police, that this causes a thinning of the fabric in that location. It taints it, which is not a new concept. I mean, there's always the concept of the haunted house where something traumatic happened that brings the ghost. But in this case...
Well, I mean, even with Books of Blood, with the dead have highways.
Yeah. Exactly. All the dead...
Because so many terrible things happened at that one intersection.
Right. But it's also a thinning
Which is from the Books of Blood, the Forbidden, this story.
Yeah, and Coleman says that when you are present and you are a witness to that, it binds you to that thing. It binds you to that ghost, to that haunting. And he was in there. He saw, Sherman Fields. He saw the injustice being committed. He saw his sister be murdered by Candyman. And when he grabs Brianna in the laundromat because she goes there looking for Anthony, he says, now there's a witness. And he ties her up, puts her in the church, and we see that Anthony is standing there, and his body at this point, half of his body is like changing into what Ryan said at the beginning, almost this like kind of trypophobia. If you have trypophobia, don't watch this movie because he's going to have this
Brundlefly looking
pockmarked skin, almost like beehive texture, right? And his hand is
cancer.
Yeah, and his hand is all desiccated, and he's like, we need Candyman. We need to bring him back. This needs to exist again. And his plan was to get Candyman to inhabit Anthony's body, saw his arm off, stick the hook in there, which he does without so much as a whimper, but just a tear from Anthony, who's like in this fugue state. And he called the police because he wants the police to come to the church, see the Anthony, a painter with a hook for an arm and a big fur jacket, run out of the church and be murdered by the police so the legend can continue. So that's what he's trying to do.
And what about him? What will happen to him?
He gets killed by Candyman. I think he wanted to. It's really weird.
He doesn't get killed by Candyman. He gets killed by Brianna. Coleman gets killed by Brianna.
Well, but he was expecting to get killed by Candyman.
Sure. Yeah, I guess. But so what happens here at this moment is that after this hugely bloody arm cutting scene and sticking the hook, Brianna cuts herself free with a pen or something that she found, and she cuts the duct tape off her hands. And that's when she kind of
gets a pen from his laundromat.
From his laundromat, yeah. And she runs out, and Burke comes out to look for her, and then he finds her. He tries to attack her, but she kind of like stabs him in the eye with the pen.
She stabs him like 100 times.
Yeah, man, it was great, and I was sad because we were discussing it last night with Joe. I was discussing it last night with Joe. Is that it's still, even though I was in the movie theater and it was fun to be in the movie theater with the wonderful lighting and the sound and everything, it still didn't feel like a movie theater experience because nobody was happy when that scene happened, and I was like, am I going to be the person to be like, hell yeah, girl, yay? Because there were other people in the theater, and I don't feel like anybody was reacting the way that. Distancing yeah, dude, I think we're just all so we just don't know how to act anymore. I don't know.
There was some reacting. There was some reacting in my theater because about half of the people there were either black or people of color, and so at some points in the movie, when, for example, Anthony's mom said, don't say his name. Or when the Troy Cartwright says something, I think in the movie, I think he says something like, I try to say his name or something. And then Troy says, we black people don't need to be summoning nothing. And it's like someone laughed.
Oh, and there was another moment like that, too, when she's exploring the laundromat, and she sees a door, and she opens it, and it goes down into a dark cellar, and she goes, and closes the door and turns around.
Says nope.
Right. That's a trope, because so many black people in horror films are always the first to die, like they always let them go down that tunnel,
But when she kills Coleman, Domingo, Burke's character, we hear Anthony come into the room and say, I think he's dead. And then someone laughed in the theater. Someone's like, yeah. So,
Okay, that's cool. That's cool that y'all had more reactions.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I like about movie theater experiences is that I like hearing other people's reactions. Sure. I know it annoys some people, but I like it.
There's people who like to record the room sound, the reaction. Someone did that when we were doing when there was the Cabal Cut premiere in the Crest in Westwood. Someone said that they recorded the audience sound throughout the whole movie and at the end. So I would love to get in touch with that person.
But I don't know. Not the Cabal Cut. That was the director's cut.
The director's cut. Yeah, the director's cut. Sorry. But there's people who do that, especially in Star Wars movies and stuff. Some people were like, I recorded the sound room for The Rise of Skywalker. So they hear when someone appears and yeah, everybody in the room. I've never been in a room like that had so much noise, but that's funny.
At my very first, cast and crew screening, and couple screenings for The Dead Pit, the film that I did, I turned and watched the audience. I faced the audience because I knew the film so well. I knew what was coming up. I knew when there was a big gag, effects gag, and I could watch people's faces and stuff.
Sure, that's awesome. Cool. I think Clive did that also during Hellraiser. He wanted to see the people's reaction to Frank getting his hand cut off by the nail in the wall. He looked around to see, and all the people were kind of wincing and grimacing. But anyway, so this is a really intense moment. We're wondering what's going to happen. What's Anthony going to do? He's just standing there, almost falling down, and then he's kind of snapped out of it, but she's really scared of him. She's pointing the pen at him, and then she they have a moment and they kind of approach each other and embrace, and he lays down on her lap and she sits down and he starts choking. He's going to die. Whatever's happening to him, whatever blood loss has caused him from losing his arm, he's about to die. And she's like, no. And she says, keep breathing, which is almost like a reference to, I can't breathe. And all of a sudden the cops that Burke called, you hear the sirens coming to the church, and this is in the house right next door to the church. And so the cops come in, and we don't see, it's not a wide angle shot, but we see Brianna, and all of a sudden we hear the cops, we see the lights, we hear
bang, 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 bang.
Bang, 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 bang. She's shocked. She kind of puts her hands to her chest, brings them out bloody. But she's like, that's not my blood. That's Anthony's blood. And then, she looks down and Anthony's been killed.
Well, the interesting thing about that, I wanted to kind of point out here is that we don't see the policeman that shoots him. We see his shadow. And to me, that was like, hey, we're setting up a new Candyman story, like all these shadow puppet shows that we've been watching, or, throughout the whole rest of that, I don't think we ever see that policeman that shoots Anthony, right?
I don't think so. I think the only policeman that we actually see is the one that's in the car with Brianna. Y'all are about to talk about it here in a second.
And from her point of view, there's a couple others that like stumble out and get...
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, the use of having this police officer, I guess, in shadow, I mean, is that also, though, a way to say, it could be anybody?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, not identifying whether they're white or black or green or whatever,
Sure. And I couldn't just help thinking about it this time about the killing of Philando Castile, because he was also shot by a cop inside the car standing right next to his girlfriend. And we've all seen the camera footage, or maybe not, but I've seen it. And
I refuse to watch it.
there's the moment where bang, 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 and she's right there next to him, and she's also like, "Oh my God, am I also shot?" And and all of a sudden she's standing next to her boyfriend who was dying, and he didn't do anything. And so the cops take Brianna.
He was too ugly to live with that.
Yeah.
and he was unconscious as far as we know when he got shot too.
Right,
He's just lying there on the ground, and she's sort of cradling him, and the police just blast him.
Yeah. So the cops take her to the cop car, right? So they got her handcuffed. They're putting her next to the car. They're throwing her against the car. They're opening the door. They're sticking her in. And this is where it gets, real intense, because the cop sits there and she's like crying. She's bloody. She's a mess. And he says, well, here's the thing. He gives her basically a choice, whether you play along with the idea that we shot him because he lunged at one of the cops, or we can say you're an accomplice and you can also go to jail. Let's say you were holding the victims and he was chopping them up, and you just see the shock.
Do they literally say that?
Yeah.
Which
we just see the shock and the anger, and then the realization in Brianna's eyes. And she's just keeping quiet. But then she says, I'll say whatever you want if you let me see myself in the mirror. And that goes to what you were saying a while ago, Ryan, because this time she's like, okay, well, this is the way we're going to play it. Well,
this is the first time in history that somebody called Candyman to use him as a weapon, right? She says his name in the mirror 5 times, and
revenge.
And the new Anthony version of Candyman comes out as a ghost and just takes out all these police.
Yeah.
Well, you've got all the bees obfuscating the face, but he's this Candyman that doesn't walk. Yeah, it is ghost-like.
Oh. He's hovering.
Yeah, can we talk about that for a second, too? Like, every time we see any kind of Candyman killing, there's this just sort of corner of your eye view of them floating with their feet kind of dangling in the air, and it's so kind of creepy and cool looking.
Yeah, for sure. So when she says Candyman, and the cop's like, what are you talking about, the Candyman? And then she says it, and all of a sudden the people who are inside the crime scene come out, and they're all bloody and like, and you see the cops shooting at the ghost approaching them, and there's all these bees just floating around. It's like they're coming out of his like body, and they're like obscuring his face, right? And so he kind of slashes the cops, and he comes over to the car. And whenever Candyman shows up, all the doors lock, right? If it's the bathroom door in the high school with the girls, or if it's
Carrie,
an elevator where Anthony is in, that's all mirrored inside, that stops.
The laundromat.
The back door of the laundromat. All the doors close, and all the doors close in the car. So the cop goes from like being shocked to terrified to, almost whimpering. And then, the Candyman kills one of the cops right in front of the window of the car and disappears, and the doors unlock. And the cop kind of like runs out with his gun drawn around the corner, and Brianna just has her door open, and she comes out and she goes around the corner to see Candyman, hooking the last cop and killing him. And he comes towards her, and all the bees are just flying around, and you can't even see his face. But basically the last words of the movie are, "Tell everyone." And then his face kind of changes into like, you know, the face of Tony, you know, several different Candymans, because that's the thing, you know, that there's been all these different incarnations of Candyman that have kind of crystallized. Like Sherman, you know, Steiny Jr., you know,
and of course
Byrd,
the original.
And of course Tony Todd. You see Tony Todd's face in CGI or de-aged or whatever, but it's made out of bees and says "Tell everyone." And that's the hashtag for the production company as well. For the marketing is "Tell everyone," or say his name. And that's just amazing. And then, you know, that's how it ends. And
because they're losing Anthony as a sort of an evangelist of Candyman, because he's dead and he's one of them. So they need someone else to carry on to keep spreading the rumor, to keep them alive. And
he was another avatar of Candyman.
That was something that I wanted to circle back to, where Jose had brought up the girls, the high school girls, you know, in the bathroom and everything. Is I pointed out to Joe that, like, I feel like in the first film, they made sure to say, you know, the killings were only in Cabrini Green, like they were only within the space that was Cabrini Green proper. But if you're going to do this whole, you know, tell everyone this huge idea,
nationwide,
Candyman,
worldwide.
Right? And Candyman went and killed these girls in a school that is not on Cabrini Green property. So in a way, you have this character now that's able to go past the confines of Cabrini Green.
Like Pinhead Unleashed in Hellraiser 3.
Right.
I like Hellraiser 3.
and the weaponization of Candyman as almost like a way to fight back against the oppressor at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Right.
That's never been done before.
Do you think it's setting it up for a sequel?
Right. Well,
I
that's
hope so.
The whole, you know, black people shouldn't be summoning anyone. And then her brother, he had mentioned something along the lines of, "Oh, this isn't a voodoo. You know, we're not in New Orleans. This isn't a voodoo thing," which I thought was
but
pretty.
But the third and the second film.
No, exactly. No, exactly. But I mean, they're really just trying to do something completely different, and I think try to give more power back to the black aspect of the original story, the original movie.
Yeah.
And there's also this weaponization nowadays of, I don't know if you all remember the video of Rodney King being beat up, but that was the beginning of the weaponization of video to show what's going on when, you know, black people get unfairly treated, or they get, you know, because back then, you know, in lynchings, we do have photos, but they were photos almost of celebratory nature.
Not live video, like how, you know, they have the cameras on the police checks now. You know?
Well, and just people standing around their phones have cameras in them.
Right. Everybody's got it.
And it goes back to also the murder of Emmett Till. His mother insisted on having not only an open casket that people could see what was done to Emmett Till, but she had a photographer come in and take pictures for a magazine as well. And, you know, basically his head, it looks like it's made out of Play-Doh. And that was one of the first times that people actually saw what had happened, just because a kid allegedly wolf whistled at a white woman. And then years later, we found out that in Deathbed Confessions, it wasn't even true. You know, and even, you know, and the guys got away with it. The two guys who murdered Emmett Till, they got away with it in the Southern courtroom, and they even took pictures in celebration. And, you know, there were people outside happy that these guys got basically cleared for killing a kid who had allegedly wolf whistled at a woman who probably wasn't even wolf whistled. So,
and even if he had done it, who cares?
Right. Yeah, it's like. No, it's this idea of putting the black person in their place, like seeing them as predators, you know, all that stuff, all this kind of fear that is almost like a justification for this racism, but it's completely fabricated. It's just another way of putting people down.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way it's always been for, you know, the Jews or, you know, whatever. You know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But let me ask you a question about, like, now, okay, we've completed the whole basic story. We're at the end, and Catalina had said that the very end had more of the shadow puppets for the trailer. I mean, the credits. Now it's done. You're sitting in the theater. You're digesting what you just saw, and you know, comparing it with the other films. And how do you think this is going to do on the box office? Like, in other words, I've heard a couple of reviews from Europeans and stuff, and they're saying, like, well, this is America. You know, like they they don't think this is going to play well in Europe or China or, other countries and stuff. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, the box office is already not doing very well, period. I mean, like, apparently Suicide Squad didn't do well at all. But, I mean, like, we went and saw it on opening night. We're very much so fans of, like, having to go into the theater for the movie theater experience, you don't get distracted by your phone. Like, you literally are just there experiencing the film. But the thing is that there's so many people that, I mean, of course, like, it's totally reasonable that people don't want to go to the theater right now, especially, like, for us, we're in Texas. Like, it's not safe. There's so many people that are used to being at home now and watching the movie at home, not having that option. We don't know. Like, literally no one knows. Like, there's stuff that gets published in Variety every few days that's, arguing about the merits or the cons of if something is released simultaneously at home and also at the theater.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any telling.
And they do that as a way to survive, right? I mean, I think this was brave and a little scary that they only did it in the theater.
For a short period. It's like 20 days or something, right, Joe?
Yeah, 17. It might be more. Sometimes, I don't know exactly what Universal has in deal, but I think I remember them saying about 17 days in the theater before they go to an on-demand platform. But I'm not sure if they're doing that for Candyman. There were other movies that they said they were going to do that, but because they haven't reached the $50 million that they wanted or whatever, they're still – it's been like over a month and they haven't put it on demand yet. But so I guess we'll wait and see on that.
I want to buy the Blu-ray.
That's the thing is that we'll have to wait and see, of course. But I would be very curious. I mean, even the original, was well received and is considered a classic and stuff, but it was no – ginormous, billion-dollar hit. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know.
I don't think that movies really are that way anymore.
Except for Marvel movies and stuff like that.
Well, the way that people consume movies is so ridiculously different than it was even like 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, I agree.
Totally. That there's really, it's a completely new world. We have no idea.
Yeah.
It's a shame that, the movie has been delayed because of the pandemic and now there's Delta or whatever. And now that kind of scared people away from theaters as well. But
and after you've seen it now, is it your opinion, that they definitely left it open and intend, if it's popular enough, to greenlight a sequel?
I hope so, really. I really do. I mean, I'm seeing like Halloween is getting another couple of sequels. I think this movie is doing very well. It got like 85% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 75% audience score. Metacritic is giving it also like a really good score. It's giving it like a 85 or whatever.
Of course, time will tell.
The movie premiered the 27th, even though there were early screenings on the 26th. Today we're recording this. It's Saturday morning for me. It's already made over $8 million on the box office.
That's awesome.
Now, yeah, Box Office Mojo.
What the budget was?
Box Office Mojo is reporting $8,400,000 at this point. I think it's doing pretty well.
They haven't even had Saturday night yet.
Yeah, exactly. So I disagree. I think this. Okay, so horror has always kind of been a little kind of difficult to become super popular.
What was the total budget for this before?
That's a good question. I would have to look it up.
My guess would be somewhere around 20 million. But I just guess.
I'm looking it up right now.
At the same time, like they wrapped before COVID hit.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so this was still operating in pre-COVID rules. And now we're now we're still in the middle of COVID, but, it's calling like, I guess, post-COVID, trying to navigate through how Hollywood
What about his other films like Get Out and stuff? Do you know what those budgets were?
Well, it's just produced by Jordan Peele. I mean, he also helped write it, and Monkey Paw Productions.
Right, but what was the budget?
So before we keep jumping from movie to movie, let me just say that the movie budget for Candyman in 1992 was $30 million.
Wow.
The budget for this movie was $25 million.
See, my guess was close. I said 20.
Yeah. And an update to the box office, it's already updated again, 9.1 million so far in box office. Wow. Yeah. So it's doing well.
Right. I mean, I think that that's pretty good in the current environment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough like theater. It's a tough like fish ladder to get up, I guess.
Well, particularly right now.
video and other platforms and stuff will also add to the revenue stream, of course.
Yeah. Forbes is reporting that on Thursday, when they did those first screenings before the actual 27 Friday, they made $2 million on Thursday alone.
My $20 went towards that.
Sure.
So now let's discuss about, in reference to the other films and, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, you mean the other Candyman films?
Yes, like the original. And
yeah, I think we already did that to some extent, but I'm just happy that they connected it in such a good way with Helen Lyle and Baby Anthony. I was really happy about that.
You mentioned she's in this film, right? Isn't
Vanessa Williams? She's in this film. She plays the mother of Anthony in the first movie.
Also Helen Lyle.
No, she's credited as the voice.
Virginia Madsen is credited.
Right, we hear her talking.
Yeah.
Like her notes from the first film.
Yeah, her audio cassettes from her thesis project.
Book. Her book project or whatever. Yeah.
I do wonder, there was some dialogue in a tape that he was listening to that I wasn't sure if that was actually from the movie. I didn't remember. There was part of it that was, because we were hearing about these people she was interviewing that were lifted directly from the movie. Like, you asked me, she was killed by Candyman. Yeah. There's a part where Anthony is in a library and he's picking up Helen Lyle's thesis to study.
He's researching.
That was a ridiculously small file. First hands him this tiny as what file? I mean, it's only like maybe 30, 40 pages, and then
she never finished her thesis. Right?
Yeah, she got interrupted.
She didn't get to. She got kind of sidetracked.
It's funny because that scene in the mirror, when he goes into the mirror and the elevator stops in the library and he's in this mirrored elevator, and all of a sudden he looks up and he sees like the ghost of Sherman Fields looking down at him. In the trailer, I saw this. One of the trailers had him say Candyman to the mirror inside the elevator, but that did not happen in the movie. So I guess at some point they had a lot of time to edit the movie. They probably had a lot of stuff that was cut. But at one point, there's a scene in the trailer that has Anthony say Candyman inside the elevator and to the mirror, and then it has that blinking effect, and then there's like the ghost looking down at him from the ceiling of the elevator. So I'm wondering what they thought about him saying Candyman inside the elevator and all that stuff, because that wouldn't make much sense. I can see why they cut it. So
or maybe that was, I don't know. I mean, it reminds movie trailers. It's like when you see somebody fire a handgun and a building explodes.
It might have been from a different point, but they were just making it look like he had been saying it specifically in that location.
Well, he was by himself. He was by himself in the elevator, and there's a quick shot in the trailer that has him saying Candyman, and he's kind of smiling. And it's like, wow, that did not happen in the movie that I saw. He was just going down the elevator, and all of a sudden he sees this piece of candy fall down, and he picks it up, opens it, and there's like a razor blade inside and cuts his finger, right? And then blood pours from above the elevator. That's when he looks up and sees a ghost. But, he never at any point says Candyman inside the elevator. So I thought that was a cool little spot. That's like, oh, they shot that, but they did not use it in the movie.
We now know that there is going to be a documentary about Candyman, and Ryan, I was able to get a press release from it.
Oh, that's right.
Do you want to mention that, Ryan?
Oh, yeah. So, and you've been talking to this person, right? Bryn Kurt James Hammond?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the in the press release, there's a paragraph here. It says, written and directed by best-selling author Bryn Kurt James Hammond, who did A Case for Murder, Brittany Murphy Files, The Complete History of the Howling. And so he's making the complete history of Candyman, delves into the original trilogy that ran from 1992 to 1999, based on the short story The Forbidden by Clive Barker, that by turns utilized the embodiment of fear-mongering seen in Do the Right Thing, but by turning it into a literal boogeyman in the deprived Cabrini Green area of Chicago, it uses elements of social criticism and the great rot of social housing while posing the question, does God exist? All through, I don't get that part. All through the eyes of the film's protagonist, which allows the viewers a bizarre tour de force of the harsh reality that results when stereotypes applied to black people are believed en masse.
Okay, yeah, we covered that once. When the news came out
on the podcast that there was this.
We did, because back in March of this year, There was a few articles, in /film.com and I think Bloody Disgusting or whatever. They were saying the complete history of Candyman documentary arriving this summer. And apparently because of the pandemic, that project was still put a little bit on hold. But we mentioned that a little bit.
And now
that it was
he's
coming.
saying Halloween 2021, it's going to come out on digital.
Yeah, there's a trailer for that on YouTube. And Bryn Kurt James Hammond is an interesting person, right? He's in the UK, but he's wrote some books. He was an editor for Gore Zone magazine in the UK. It was later rebranded as GZ magazine that closed down in 2011. And he wrote A Case for Murder, Brittany Murphy Files, like you said. He wrote another book about Anna Nicole Smith, and then he did also a cookbook for newbies. And the Howling book, right? He did a book about the Howling series. So cool. Yeah, the press release is interesting. So does he want us to spread this around as well, or is it just...
Well, that's what press releases are for. I mean,
exactly, yeah.
Texting with him, and he sent me a copy of his Howling book, and I've been having Nina read it to me. And I have some Candyman material myself. I've met Tony Todd in person many times and done some, interviews with and I visited the set of of Candyman 2 and Hellraiser 4 and Lord of Illusions one time down in LA and videoed some of that. So I think he might want to get some of that material from me for the documentary, but we are just beginning to discuss this sort of thing.
Yeah, gotcha.
Well, you got 2 months if it's going to be released on Halloween. So
right, yeah, that's a good point.
I've seen the trailer for this. It seems interesting. It's mostly based on like people talking about their experiences with the movie, and I think his theme is going to be to connect this a lot to Do the Right Thing. He mentions that a lot here in the thing. It says Candyman history comes full circle by analyzing the symbiotic relationship between the horror genre and the African American experience, and how Spike Lee's masterpiece Do the Right Thing became the bracing model for how the studio system packaged contemporary racial issues in a manner that startlingly respects the ability of viewers to think for themselves, leading to the birth of Bernard Rose's Candyman. The two are inextricably linked, and its sequels. So I'm interested to see how he does that connection. I mean, I'm not super familiar with what kind of references he's going to use from Do the Right Thing. But yeah, it's
we'll
definitely...
see. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
I think cool.
Going back to this movie, there were a few like really creepy kind of cool moments that I wanted to bring up. So one is all the different ways that you see the Sherman Fields Candyman floating with his feet kind of dangling in the air. Like out of the corner of your eye, or in a compact mirror, or different ways that you see that was
reflective surfaces.
Yeah, really neat. And then another one was that when the death of the critic that Catalina was celebrating, that it's shown from way back in another building, right? And so you're looking across the skyline.
It's a pullback. It's a pullback. In the middle of the pullback, you're seeing her get murdered.
Yeah. And she's really small on the screen, and she gets like lifted up and pushed up against her window and kind of drug across it. But it's really small, and you see the Chicago skyline and stuff.
In a very fancy, in a very fancy gentrified building full of duplexes, and everything is like ceiling to wall windows, and other people are having, you see the people around her also living their lives and doing their things in their fancy homes, and she's like slammed against the window, smeared across it, and then dropped.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because like I was saying, I wish we had been a little bit closer to see her glorious death. But Joe was like, no, it was good that they did it this way because it's showing you how insignificant she is.
Man. Yeah.
With the pullback. Yeah. Like I said, we talked about it a lot. We stayed up till we watched the movie at a 6:00 screening. We finally got home around like 9, got the kid into bed, and we were up till probably 1 discussing it.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. How was it like after the movie ended? What was the reaction in your theaters?
Everyone immediately got up and left. We were the only people that sat through the entire credits. But we always sit to the end of the credits, yeah.
They didn't see the credit stuff with the little shadow puppets? Oh,
yeah, same here. Everybody left except me.
Like a lot of Marvel, people... post-credit sequences they could have missed.
Yeah, a lot of people in my theater stayed and watched the whole thing, but maybe it was because, like I said, there were a lot of black people in my screening here in Dayton, in Miamisburg and Dayton. There's a lot of African Americans. There's a big community here. Yeah, I stayed until the end, and it was just like people were kind of getting up, but it was like everybody was silent because it's not a real
exuberant. It's not a feel good exuberant.
Yeah, once you're done watching it, you're full of all these thoughts and all these ideas, and people were really quiet. The people who were sitting right next to me, they were really quiet, and they were just like very intensely staring at the screen. And then,
would you call this a scary movie? Was it horrific? Like a good horror scare.
There's definite, I mean, I'm a little desensitized to horror because, but yeah, definitely there are moments where it's like, my wife was grabbing my hand and definitely there were moments where I don't know. I tend to see more the beauty in horror sometimes. That's my experience with Hellraiser was I wasn't scared.
Like the audiences that you were with, what was their reaction? Was it to them? Do you think it was a scary movie?
Yeah, I think people were just hungry for going back into the movie theater. Like I said, there were some reactions to certain scenes. There was some laughter here, some gasp there, but I think people were really like eating up the movie. They were very determined to enjoy this movie experience, and I think they were just intensely immersed into it.
It was nice because I feel like a lot of times we don't have films anymore where they just let things land, like if something happens, they're immediately on to the next action instead of sitting with the thing that happened and going, okay, we're going to give it a few minutes for it to settle. And I feel that this film did a really good job of letting things land.
Yeah.
And that was nice to have that because things don't need to be packed wall to wall. Things can still happen even if it's a quiet scene.
Yeah, I like slow burns for films.
And also, I think the people who were in the theater to watch this movie wanted to be there. It was a deliberate choice, which makes a big difference. You see a lot of people engaged in the movie because it's like if they're there, they wanted to watch this movie. And it's not just back in the day when people you go into like The Hobbit and there's people laughing at the scenes where the hobbits are going down the flowing molten gold and people are like, ha ha, oh my God, this is terrible. And people are on their phone and eating popcorn. This was a very like determined, deliberate audience that was in the room with me watching this.
Well, you know what I mean? Like when you used to go to see a scary movie like The Exorcist or something back in the early heyday, like when it first came out and stuff, like people would come out of the theater and go like, that scared the crap out of me,
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier about, that specific movie theater experience, I didn't feel it last night. And I don't think it has anything to do with the film. I think it has to do with the fact that, we're all pretty scarred from what happened last year, so we don't really know how to act because
you're not scared as much as
the thing is though, is that like it is a different environment because you have the fucking virus, Oh, sorry. I don't know if I was allowed to drop that word.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
You're absolutely fucking allowed.
That is F-bomb. Okay. I've been trying really hard to rein in my language. Anyway, so when we have the virus and it's always just constantly looming over you. It's constantly looming over you. But the last time that we were Joe and I were in a packed theater is that we went to see Get Out. Opening night, and it literally, like nobody had ever seen it before. It was opening night, like really, truly, it was completely packed. It was pre-COVID, and I remember having so much fun because everybody was really, really invested in the film. Yeah. And we were even talking to people like as we were walking out the theater, and it gave you that feeling of wanting to talk to other people. But in last night,
I like that. I used to
really do that anymore.
At the theater,
you don't do that anymore. Not with COVID and social distancing. And eventually we'll get back to that. I think that we will get back to it eventually, but I think it's too soon.
I think also that it's one of those things where this is a sequel, so we kind of know what we're getting when you go. You know how Candyman kills people. It's not like going to see a brand new thing, like The Exorcist was at that time, or
it's like a vampire movie. He's going to have fangs. He's going to bite people on the neck.
Yeah.
Also, since I was one of the last people to leave the theater, everybody was already out, so. I didn't get to see them talk about it outside. It was a late it was 7:30 session, so it ended up, shortly around 9 or whatever. So, yeah, I guess I didn't really see a lot of people chatting, but they were kind of talking to each other on the way out of the theater a little bit. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I'm thinking this movie will go to make at least $20 million on the weekend, if not more. And you were asking earlier, what do we think about how this movie is going to be taken in Europe or China? Frankly, I couldn't care less about how it's going to be taken in China, because I don't think it's meant for the context of the Chinese audience. That might sound a little harsh, but I think this definitely has a lot to do with America and in Europe.
American.
Yeah, in Europe, it's definitely going to reflect, because not only have Black Lives Matter protests dominated 2020 in America, but they also had a lot of protests in other countries around the world. Black Lives Matter protests in Portugal and Spain and, in all these other countries, in England. There's definitely this has been a thing that, racism is not limited to America. It's something that exists in every culture. So I think this is relevant.
Especially when you get into, for me, since I'm Mexican, there's a lot of colorism, where when Roma came out and Yalitza was attacked a lot because she's indigenous looking. So people just automatically, they didn't want to see her because she's indigenous looking. And so it goes against the whole idea of, because with Mexico, you're more concerned with the people that look more Spanish than people that look more indigenous. And then there's a whole bunch of Afro-Latinos, and that was something that was an issue with In the Heights. We wanted to see it. We like musicals, we wanted to see it, but we were watching the trailer and we were like, you know what? The more trailers we saw, we were like, I don't even really think that shows the kind of people, it's not even representative of the kind of people that are in this community. So I don't really want to give my money to that. So colorism is something that people don't really talk about in America, but that is something that does happen a lot in other countries. Yeah.
Definitely in the website, CandymanMovie.com, there's a lot of material to go through there. And I was surprised when I started visiting the website, and even this morning I was reading stuff from it, and they have all these featurettes and all these conversations and all these – they even have a syllabus, which is almost 50 pages long, about essays about the movie, essays about Candyman, essays about gentrification in Cabrini Green, with the story of Cabrini Green, with all that stuff. It's really interesting. I do recommend that you go to that website and read that. And also the nonprofit organizations that they're supporting, including a barbershop initiative where they're training barbers in barbershops to be more positive in terms of helping people with their mental health, having conversations based around mental health, destigmatizing that thing. It's called the Confess Project Coalition. So they're committed to building a mental health culture for boys, men of color, and their families through capacity building, advocacy, organizing, and movement building. They want to be able to have barbers and equip them to have active listening, positive communication, validation, and how to reduce mental health stigma when servicing and interacting with clients. These are all interesting, beautiful, and positive things that they're definitely using the medium of cinema as well as a way to promote this be a vehicle to also all this positiveness and empowerment of the Black community, which I think is really, really good. They also talk about the artists that appear in the movie, like in the show that Yahya Mateen's Anthony's character has the painting in. They have a featurette about all the other pieces of art that we see hanging and who are the authors of those pieces of art. So
too bad some of Clive's stuff couldn't have been in there.
Sure.
Well, I really so at the very end, right, they had the credits, the ending credits. There is one title card that says, based on the 1992 Bernard Rose film Candyman, which was based on The Forbidden by Clive Barker.
Exactly. So, yeah. It's not in the beginning, but it's in the end.
But it is there, and it gets its own title card. There's literally nothing else on the screen besides that one sentence. Exactly. And I thought that was fair, because it is so heavily based on the movie.
Yeah.
But they did do a good job of trying to bring in the whole, urban legend. Or they did. They didn't try. They did it. They did bring in the urban legend aspect of it.
Sure.
And played off of it really well.
And there were elements of a couple of the lines from the Forbidden that Anthony says when he's floating around the police car.
Yeah, that was great.
Also in the syllabus that you can download from the website is an essay from Professor Tenararive-Due. She's she's an American author, executive producer of Horror Noir, which is a documentary about black people in horror, black horror.
Yes, I cannot recommend it enough. Sorry.
It is very good.
It's on Shudder. It's amazing.
And Tony Todd narrates the whole thing, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
Tenararive-Due is also a UCLA lecturer, and she's a film historian with expertise in black horror. And she does mention what you were talking about, like, it's fair to put that thing. And some people were complaining about why is Clive Barker's name not at the beginning of the movie, and all that stuff. This essay opens with Nia DaCosta's Candyman could be titled Candyman Reclamation. A reclamation of our story, a reclamation of our history, a reclamation of our trauma. In adapting Clive Barker's story, The Forbidden, which takes place in Liverpool as an examination of urban myths and classicism, 1992's Candyman transplanted the story to a struggling community in the United States, specifically Chicago's Cabrini Green housing project. And then it goes on into Daniel Robitaille's story, discusses critically the movie and how this new reboot is kind of a reclamation. And I think that reclamation was pretty well achieved. I don't see it as swiping it from the hands of Clive Barker. I see it as grabbing a story that went into a right direction with Bernard Rose and just pivoting it on that direction and making it bigger, just going deeper into it. Well, so I think that was very well accomplished.
And I think Candyman kind of, it's grown and become something bigger than the short story.
Yeah, which was the whole point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Make it like these kids growing up thinking about Candyman because they knew about the scary movie and all that stuff. It's like, hey, that's cool. It's like a real life implementation of the concept of the story in Clive Barker's book. Yeah, exactly. It's so cool. To this day, you ask people to say Candyman in the mirror. I asked my wife, you want to say Candyman in the mirror 5 times? She's like, nope. I'm not doing it. You do it.
I won't do
That's
it either.
That's what I meant about this new publicity trick of having you say it to get to the last trailer.
Yeah,
I'm just curious how many people feel a little hackle raise when they actually do it, or maybe there'll be a lot of people who won't do it.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't do it.
I actually though they went to Chicago last week and they set up a booth that is lined on the inside with mirrors, and then they had people physically go inside the booth and do it 5 times. To me, that would be scary. I personally would not be able to go inside the booth and do it. Now, to my phone, it's not a big deal because it's like, okay, well, it's my phone. It's not technically a mirror. Although something that they did do in the movie is that it was reflections. It did not necessarily have to be a mirror. It could be any reflective surface. So it could be like a chrome
bumper or a hubcap.
Any reflective surface.
In Candyman 2, it was the dust jacket of that book, right, was one of them.
Yeah, it was Purcell's book had a reflective cover.
Yeah. One amazing use of the marquee poster would be, I was saying that to my wife yesterday, and I think I told it to Ed when I called him yesterday. I was like, they should have made one, at least in the big marquee, like maybe in the Chinese theater or something. They should have put a mirror in the marquee just with a logo Candyman and say his name. That would have been an awesome idea, I think. But, I don't know. But they did the booth thing. So
my theater didn't have a poster. I wanted to do like a selfie in front of the poster, so that we could have something to put on Facebook or whatever. They didn't have. Yeah, they still had a poster for Black Widow, and that movie was like a month old.
Oh, they had a poster on my theater, but not at the entrance of the room. They had it outside in front of the theater. There was the posters of all the movies they're showing.
Yeah.
So Candyman was there. So yeah.
Back when
we took selfies in front of the poster.
Oh, man, this is so good.
Candyman first came out, I got some promotional buttons, and one of them was like a piece of Mylar, like a little chunk of mirror, and it just had printed on it Candyman with a pin back on the back.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I still have it.
We still have a lot of Candyman swag.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's how we got that game.
Fun.
We got that
yeah,
game.
right, the Candyman 2 board game. That was awesome.
So the locations for this movie, I just want to bring up some stuff because Yahya Abdul Mateen did post some Instagram videos throughout the production and all that stuff. So he did post some videos of the places where they were shooting. And even though most of Cabrini Green was demolished between 1995 and 2011, only those few original row houses are standing today. So some of those were what we see. They actually shot it there. They also filmed some of the movie in North Park community area, parts of North St. Louis Avenue. They also did some in at the Marina City, the Corn Cob. They shot some sequences there. And then some of those sequences where they're inside a museum and stuff, that was inside the Museum of Contemporary Art, at 220 East Chicago Avenue in Cook County. And so that was the first feature production to shoot inside that historical museum. So they, nobody else had used that before as a location.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
There was something brought up in this review from The Guardian that's kind of funny that, I think probably they mentioned that everybody's thought about this with Candyman. They say, how much time needs to go by between the fourth Candyman and the fifth Candyman before you're starting over again and it's number one saying it one time?
What?
So, like, you say the fourth Candyman, but then can you, like, the next day say the fifth one?
Or what are the logistics?
Yeah,
right, okay.
Yeah.
What are the rules?
Yeah.
Like
so,
the Hellraiser box. Like, look at how throughout the years, like if originally, you're supposed to be like feverishly working on it with sweat all over yourself and everything until you can manage to finally open the box, But then in other films, it's just like, oh, I dropped it. Whoa! The hell is this right through here?
There was one where somebody dropped it on the floor and it changed.
This is true, though. That did happen in a
Another piece of text in the closing credits was something directing the viewers to the social impact campaign built for the film. So there's that's where you can find the syllabus that I was talking about. About 50 pages worth in a PDF. It says here is designed to promote racial healing and real world context for the tragedies cited in the movie. So they take that position of being careful and properly contextualizing that stuff that they use in the movie. So it's not just be seen as like, oh, they're just using this to promote a fictional story. There is a message. There is an intention behind this, which is also why all the artists that they put in the show are black artists and all that stuff. Which, of course, leads to people who don't get this stuff commenting on our podcast blog posts about Candyman saying, "Oh, I'm not going to see the movie. Jordan Peele is racist because he says he just wants to hire black people," which is kind of a stupid approach to thinking about this. He's just trying to.
Are there no white people in this film?
There are.
No, there are. Yeah,
no, there are.
Okay, well,
there are.
Really
I mean, and it's funny because I actually pointed it out to Joe this morning. I said, one of my favorite little just tidbits is that, okay, so like they're all sitting, it's Brianna and Anthony and her brother and his boyfriend. Okay. So his boyfriend is white. And they're all talking, right? They're all being like just forward with each other, normal, they're comfortable. And at one point they do lean over to the boyfriend and say, "No offense." But they never do it ever again. They just do the one time saying no offense to the one white guy who that we see fairly often.
Yeah,
and
he's pretty much a brunette guy, yeah.
Yeah, but he still is a white guy. And, but sure. I still thought it was funny because, like, sometimes I'll be sitting around and I'll be talking about something that is, like, specifically for me, okay, I'm brown, so this is how I see something. But I can feel my roommate getting, like, mad or offended, and I have to say, oh, no offense to her. And I'm like, I'm obviously not talking about you, dude. You're my roommate. Like, I know that you're not a bad person.
Yeah.
I shouldn't feel the need to have to say no offense to a white person who's my friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sure. And can we just take a moment, Catalina, to talk about Nathan Stewart Jarrett, who plays Troy, his outfits and his magnificent butt, because that is pretty prominent in the beginning of the movie, and he does play a sassy role.
He's the brother of Brianna.
Yeah, he's the gay brother. Yep. Yeah. He's pretty sassy, and there's some jokes about his butt, and he's got like a great wardrobe throughout the whole thing. It's pretty good. He's a great sassy character. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I appreciated that Candyman didn't systematically go through and kill every single person in Anthony's life like what I was expecting to happen.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, he does not.
Yeah, I thought Brianna was going to get killed, and I really liked her, and I thought that the brother and the brother's boyfriend were going to die, and they didn't.
That was good. Yeah, that was really good. So I'm very excited to see how far this movie is going to reach.
If it has legs.
Yeah, and I want there to be a sequel. I'm kind of wary of saying the word sequel because every time a remake comes out like this, or a reboot, or a spiritual sequel, it's very hard for it to actually have a second one, except for Halloween.
I think the only thing that makes it, brings up the question of is this a reboot or whatever, is just the fact that it's got the same name as the first movie. I kind of wish that it had been called like Candyman Say My Name or Candyman something, so just to make it easier for us to talk about it. Now forever we're going to have to call it Candyman 2021.
Yeah, the colon era is gone. That was a lot like in the late 90s or, early and late 90s. There was the movies that were like Hellraiser, Hell on Earth, The Howling.
They never want to call a movie, number 4.
Yeah, there was a time when they moved from the numbers to the colon, and now it's just name, year. It's,
all those Saw movies, like they still keep putting the numbers on those, right?
No, not technically.
Okay, well, Fast and the Furious then. I think they still say Fast and Furious 6 and 7.
This last Saw movie is just Spiral. Actually, they dropped the Saw completely, and it was just Spiral. I liked it. I thought it was fun.
Isn't it a prequel or something?
Nah. No, it's different.
Oh.
I liked it, but also I like all of the Saw movies, like legitimately. Even the ones that I don't like, I still like them. Like, I don't know what my problem is.
Well, you're a horror fan. That's cool.
That premise creeps me out, so I won't watch them.
The Saw premise.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? The fans are going to say. Like now that it's out, now everybody's going to start talking about it and stuff.
Well, I would tell everybody. Although if they're this far, they've hopefully already watched it. But I would tell everybody just don't make any judgments about it until you've seen it for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think the consensus is going to be in fandom, though, from your experience?
I have Facebook friends who already started saying things like, "Oh, this was a shallow movie. I didn't like it. Really? I can't believe that." Yeah. There's at least one person in my Facebook list that didn't like it, which is valid. They have their opinion.
We know our friend Marcus, who's been on the show, has watched it and he liked it.
Yeah. So my only advice to people is watch the first movie. If you were deliberate about watching this movie, watch the first movie first. Go see it. You'll have a much better understanding of certain things in the movie. You'll have a better experience. And go to a mirror, say his name 5 times. See what happens.
It's not like one of those reboots where they say, okay, the first one happened and the other ones didn't. They leave enough space to say, yeah, those other sequels, maybe could have happened
Could have happened too.
Yeah, they don't talk about them really much at all, but
some of the information is assumed, like the Helen. Yeah. I mean, not only Helen, but the first, girlfriend or whatever, lover of the original Candyman, Daniel Robitaille.
Right. Yeah, and so they don't go out of their way to discount the sequels like the Halloween.
They could, yeah.
The Halloween ones take off from Halloween 1, and they say all those other ones didn't happen.
Well, one of the interesting things is coming up. Isn't Texas Frightmare Weekend coming up, and Virginia Madsen's going to be there in person? I understand.
She just canceled.
Oh, I thought it was she changed her mind. It was going to come. Because,
no. I don't know. As of last week, she canceled.
Okay.
Oh.
And Clive Barker canceled too, right?
Yeah, Clive Barker canceled a while ago, but also I don't think it's safe for him to come out here. Yeah. The rules for Frightmare this year is that you have to wear masks in the common area because it's actually at a huge hotel. Yeah,
especially with Governor Abbott banning mask mandates throughout the state.
No, but the hotel is on international space. I'm sorry?
Okay.
Is the dealer's hall the common area?
No, it is the hotel common area.
Oh,
so, for example, if you went to go get a coffee, up at the hotel coffee shop or whatever, you're supposed to wear a mask. I mean, I'm pretty nervous because, Delta is completely ravaging Texas. Like, everything is red right now. We went to see the movie last night. I felt pretty safe. I've been feeling fairly safe going to the movies, but also, they haven't been very full. Now, I did go to see a screening at Texas Theater a month and a half ago, and there was literally no space at all. And I didn't take off my mask at all.
Sure.
Not even for a drink, not even for popcorn. I did not eat or drink anything just because it was so full.
Yeah.
But
I had my mask on for most of the movie too. Yeah.
Yeah, but I felt pretty safe at the screening last night because, like I said, there weren't a lot of people, and most people were wearing their masks.
Anyways, now that it's out, I'm dying to find out what the general population of horror fans thinks, and how well it does at the box office and everything.
Well, I recommend everybody go see it. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think that it's such a delicate, for some weird reason, Jordan Peele, even though he didn't direct it, is such a divisive character. And I know y'all touched on it earlier. But I think that, if people have already determined that they aren't going to like it, then they're not going to like it. There's nothing you can do to change their mind, But the people that do go see it and they're like, hey, I have an open mind, I think that they will enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, you know how films are often, even The Thing or, Blade Runner and stuff, in the theater run, they weren't necessarily huge successes, but in long term on video and stuff, they're eventually sometimes a film that gets terrible reviews is considered a classic,
I think this movie is actually being pretty successful. I do think it's getting really good reviews. Yeah, it's doing good in the box office too. I mean, for what the period that we're going through right now in terms of, there's one thing that really annoyed me in the theater, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but it's why am I watching YouTuber videos before I see the previews? Why am I watching
what are you talking
ads for TV shows on FXX and whatever before I watch my movie?
Didn't do that.
If you guys want people to go more to the theater and not watch them on TV or streaming platforms, why are you saturating the previews with YouTuber videos talking about what you're going to see? TV ads for TV shows and FX and Hulu and all that stuff.
Dude, what? Yeah, everyone's pre-show is different because let's see, you went to a Cinemark.
Yeah.
Ryan just said he went to a Regal. See, because we don't have Regal. We literally had one Regal in the entire DFW Metroplex, and it shut down.
Oh.
So we go to so we have the nearest one for us is going to be AMC. Mm-hmm. And for our pre-show pack, they kept on trying to get you to download some game that you could play.
Oh my God, me too! A mobile game just before the previews.
Dude, that's the one where you aim your camera at the screen and you're zapping aliens.
It's time to flip out your phone, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, they used to tell us to turn off the phone at this point.
Well, it's not the experience that it used to be.
Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm. But also, I mean, as we mentioned, it was pretty expensive, and I don't know how detrimental that's going to be for. I mean, because our tickets were $40, and then I don't even know how much we paid in childcare.
Sure.
Yeah, and my theater, they the box office is closed. They put posters and junk in front of it, and they make you buy your tickets at the concession stand.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Theaters are having a pretty rough time right now.
Yeah.
For sure.
It'll be interesting to see what ends up happening.
Yeah. And this podcast having no beginning will have no end. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have subscribed. You can find the Clive Barker Podcast wherever you find audio. Show notes for this episode, as well as news and reviews, can be found at our website at www.clivebarkercast.com. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and blog that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans. Watch for our annual Kickstarter fundraisers to get some cool stuff, and you can buy t-shirts on our TeePublic store. Go to tpublic.com and search for BarkerCast.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening.